Welcome back, everybody. The
Very
Aaron's High
appropriate.
Cabin Adventure Radio
Very
program.
appropriate.
That music, man, I just felt
I am
that
the
was
coolest
Ross
man in the
today.
room.
Ross, how you doing?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right.
Today is very interesting. We're here arguing about some very interesting topics. I
Well,
thought we were covering
yeah.
some things. He thought we were covering others.
But you know what's funny?
And we're going
Either
to
one
cover
is gonna be
something that I think is a little absurd too, from a lot of standpoint. We're arguing here about knuckles, brass knuckles, and clubs. I thought we were talking about unusual firearms like machine guns and.
Well, wait a minute. I want them to understand. This was the question I had. It was basically, Ross, I want to talk about questionable weapons. Weapons that can possibly get you in trouble. And one thing I was talking about was I was looking at this thing online, and it looked like a knife handle, but it had a whip. And I think, well, that'd be a nice little thing to have. So let me check it out and see where it falls. But I think it's falling under a club. That's where I was getting at. All these weird kind of, and then you're coming up with
I've been really waiting to talk about NFA regulated firearms, Gun Control Act regulated firearms,
NFA
and
stands
transfers
for
of
National Firearms
Act, which is going to be machine guns, short barrel shotguns, short barrel rifles, silencers, which is a big thing right now. It's been a big thing anyway, and destructive devices, which probably doesn't apply to as many people. But I think those first four categories are going to be something that people are going to want to know about. We haven't spoken much about that, and it's complicated. I even mentioned something to you when I walked in here. You weren't. You're like, "What is that?" And it concerns me. A lot of people should know about. And so I don't know if we get to that today. We definitely need to make that the topic for next week or at the next show, because it should have been, I think, something we should have spoke about more. But let's talk about the clubs and the knuckles. So,
well, let me give the list. Let me just get the listening audience an idea of what I'm kind of getting around. I just written down a bunch of things that could potentially be questionable. Like, you think you're going outside with a baseball bat, it turns into a club, or brass knuckles. Ross and I were just talking about brass knuckles, whips, NFA, which we'll brush on that, National Firearms Act, AOW weapons, all other weapons, tools of opportunities. A bottle, table, baseball cap, keys. Martial arts, when does that come into effect? And what is the definition of weapons, firearms, etc.? Just let's go over the whole gamut here. And the number here, 254-697-6633. If you got that questionable weapon and you want to call up and say, yeah, man, I'm carrying this pitchfork and I got a short handle on it and I bent the prongs a certain way. Can I carry that on the street? Go ahead and give us a call. We'll kind of figure it out.
So I mean, I don't want to say any name of the weapon, and we won't go into specifics and identify things, but you'd asked me a while back. It was a very neat item. Kind of had a handle, very efficient and convenient for, say, a lady that was running, okay, or in her evening workout routine in downtown Houston, maybe, that wanted extra protection but didn't want to carry an actual pistol on her. Maybe didn't have the room for that, and it kind of I think it kind of popped out, or it was a handle, and all she has to do is flick the wrist and the thing.
It looks exactly like if I'm standing up and I got a little folding knife blade in my pocket, which I do right now. That's what you would see, but it's extended a piece of wire that turns it into a whip. It's
very thin wire,
thin and stiff. Yes.
And so I don't know if you've ever hit a blade of grass maybe with a wire or something like that. You just chop that thing in half.
It'll put a welt on you for sure.
And the guy was going through some examples online, and I mean, it was messing up the mannequin. Okay?
It's very concealable and it's very quick to deploy, and it has it's a short range weapon. However, if it hits you, it smarts.
And I don't actually know the answer about whether that would qualify as a club, but I think that there could be some police officers on the street that would think that was a club. And a club is anything designed, made, or adapted for the purpose of inflicting serious bodily injury or death by striking a person with the instrument, including but not limited to. We talk about a blackjack, a nightstick, a mace, and a tomahawk. Okay, so
Tomahawk.
yeah, that's cool, isn't it? I think the blackjack, the billy clubs, things like that, we kind of get. I don't know that necessarily qualifies as one of those, because those are more of a solid object with blunt force that you could follow through with And I think a really good argument to say it's really not the same thing.
I would surely love to carry it if I could get some definite.
Okay, and so the mace is the thing that that throwing in the mace is what really concerns me, because I think that deal had a heavier piece on the end, which would help you guide it for aim and direction purposes. And it wasn't very big; it was just a small little piece on the end. But if you know what a mace is, that'd be like in the medieval days, you'd have a stick, and then it'd be bolted down. It'd be a chain, right, attached to the stick, and then the chain would be attached to, say, a ball or a spike, or some bigger mechanism. You could probably look this up online.
Well, let me clarify that other piece. I think that little metal cap on the end was just to keep the wire from fraying. I don't think
probably, maybe I don't know. Okay, and like I said, that's why I'm not calling anybody out here. But I'm saying that this bigger piece looks to me, it could be construed as very similar to a mace. And I think that, there may be some problems there, and that's unfortunate, because I think that is a good tool. And is it specifically designed to inflict serious bodily injury? I don't know about death, okay, but sure, I mean, if you hit the person in the throat, maybe just the right way, maybe a deadly weapon, but could it cause serious bodily injury? I think, when you talk about protracted loss of a bodily member or function, or something to that effect, you could definitely put somebody's eye out. You could definitely, I think, hurt some part of your body to where you don't have the normal use of that, part of the body. So I think that part of the definition, and it's for the purpose of protection.
Yes, it is.
And so it's for the purpose of hurting somebody.
It's funny, though. I can carry a gun and shoot you in self-defense and walk away, possibly. But if I save myself using this particular item that we're talking to, I'm going to get possibly arrested. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, and so it says so they're actually illegal in Texas unless if you have them registered with the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record, right, with the ATF. And had I known we were talking about clubs today, I would have tried to figure out if we could register any kind of club or a mace at all whatsoever with the ATF. And I honestly don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I'll have you an answer next week or at some point. And I have, that kind of brings us to what we were arguing about when I got here. When you go to these gun shows, you see these folks selling the brass knuckles. I haven't done a bunch of research on it, but it's the same rule for brass knuckles. If you can register the brass knuckles, okay, with the National Registration and Transfer Record with the local branch of the ATF, then you're able to carry that weapon. Well, I've been unable to find in the ATF database where you can actually register those weapons. It may exist, it may not, and a couple people were saying, no, you can't register it. And so I'm like, well, why? Every single gun show, you got at least 10 guys there that have brass knuckles, and you've got 20 cops in the room, right? And they're never getting in trouble. And so I find it hard to believe, but Matt's sitting here saying, well, they're paperweights.
That's what they are, dude.
And so, I mean,
they're pretty cool novelty paperweights.
I mean, I like it. But
I could use a paperweight as a weapon.
You could, definitely. You could
so
use a pencil.
So then why not have one that looks cool and looks like a pair of brass knuckles?
I mean, and that's what, I mean, if I don't have a good answer. I know you hate to, I don't have a good answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, 254-697-6633. Give us a call if you come up with some cockamamie ideas for weapons. I mean, we're not going to put your name on there. We just want to hear what you got or come up with, or some ideas of weapons. And the other thing, too, I do this in my license to carry class. And people look at me like, what? What are you doing? And I do it because I've got limited time to get the idea across. You cannot make mechanical devices that are known, intentionally designed to cause harm or death. And I said, I get this double-barrel shotgun, and I strap it down in this chair, and I have it pointed towards the front door, so when the people open up the door, it pulls the string and blows them in two halfway down. And they're like, no. And I go, of course not, you can't do that. That's a designed weapon to cause death or mass destruction. I can't do that. So people may be doing punji sticks, blow darts, all that kind of stuff, and maybe have a tomahawk.
Right, and then you have any other weapons, okay, which is AOWs, so people say, and it's just a weapon that's designed to be concealed. That's a gun, basically. That is any combination of the shotgun rifle, but designed to be concealed, and that doesn't really fall into any other classes of firearms, and so those have to be registered at the national level as well, and that kind of brings us to the silencers and the machine guns and the short-barreled firearms. Like,
of course, you know that silencers are just grease traps, right?
And so so that's another. You got silencers at the gun shows too, but they're not full silencers. They're broken into parts, and they're just what he's saying for grease traps, which is another conundrum in itself. I don't. I was gonna say there's actually a pretty good ruling from the ATF. I think it was a 2005 ruling. You can look it up about whether a lot of guys do these competitive paintball shoots, and this ruling they actually had put silencers on the paintballs. I mean, some guys really get serious about this. There's special forces guys that come from special forces get into this paintball stuff, and they have big wars and everything. It's a big deal. And so they have silencers on their paintball guns. Well, the ATF ruling said that if you have this silencer permanently attached to the paintball gun, then it doesn't qualify as one of these weapons that have to be registered. But as soon as you remove the silencer, or you remove the silencer and part of the barrel from the actual weapon, that automatically you're in possession. You've committed probably 3 offenses. You've probably committed a violation at the state level, a violation of the NFA, okay, and you've also committed tax evasion.
You know, ATF comes up with some weird, crazy, stupid rules, in my opinion. But when you look at it sometimes and you read what they're doing, they're taking this law and they're saying this says this says this. And that's stupid. Doesn't matter. That's what it says. But it also worked in our favor for like the Mossberg Shockwave. Everybody looks at it as a short-barreled shotgun. No, it's a firearm because based on the Gun Safety Act in 1968, it says if this weapon is built in a certain manner, has this certain length, it's a firearm, not a pistol, rifle, or a shotgun. So it doesn't fall under any of those categories. So when we're talking about what you're just saying here, the words are specific, and there's sometimes it hampers you, and sometimes it enables you based on the
to
words.
be innovative,
loopholes.
right? For the innovative folks, right. It's been helpful. I think they've even I read some articles about how some of the NFA rules actually allowed people to use electronic fingerprinting and things like that to go a lot faster. The process, as far as the initial process of applying, it doesn't make it any faster waiting on the ATF to come back with approval. But it still takes 6 to 7 months, sometimes a year, depending on what you're getting and how you paid and what entity or individual you're going through. But so for the innovative folks, some of these regulations actually help, but it has hurt a lot. And I think a lot of people have been waiting as far as silencers on the Hearing Impaired Act, which I heard got killed because of Las Vegas. But
didn't get killed; it just got brushed to the side,
yeah,
which I guess is the same meaning, right?
Yeah.
But you see that one? That's a stupid one because that's to aid your hearing, because it does not silence a weapon. I mean, this is something everybody knows. A silencer does not silence a weapon. It dampens the noise, the decibels, so that you can shoot it without going deaf. But you're definitely going to hear the weapon.
So, the other side of that is to say, if you don't want to have hearing impairment, then use headphones, or not headphones, but hearing protection, the earplugs.
It's kind of hard when you're hunting and that animal snaps a twig and you got earmuffs on and you're like, I didn't hear nothing.
Right, and there's a lot of military guys too that are advocating for more use of silencers in the actual service. I've had probably 10 people at least in my office that have a disability for hearing almost deaf that is solely related to their time in the military.
I think it got in there somehow under a misnomer, the perception that it's actually so silent that nobody would know you're using a gun. It's not. It deadens the sound so that it doesn't make you go deaf.
Yeah, but yes, so it does help with the hearing. But just know this: so under the Gun Control Act, that controls basically firearms in general. It's going to talk about transfer of weapons. You really can't transfer some of these weapons out of state. There are exceptions, say for instance for inheritance to heirs and things like that. But you've got to have you've got to meet their rules if you want to transfer it out of state, even to maybe like a brother-in-law. But then when you get into the special weapons like the silencers and the machine guns, and that's a gun that can fire more than once with a single pull of the trigger, and you've got the short barrel firearms, and you've got the destructive devices. If you're trying to transfer those normally have to be registered. And the thing about these are, and this is what I want to talk about, a lot of people don't understand this concept, is that when you want to deal with these weapons, the best way to go is to get a gun trust. And a lot of people know what these gun trusts are. A lot of people don't. And a lot of people are more familiar with the LLC corporation standpoint. But the reason you get an entity rather than owning it and applying for ownership by yourself is because you've got to go through a few more hoops in order to get ownership of these weapons. And the main hoop you'd have to go through is to basically have a record of it and to go to the chief law enforcement officer of the location where you're at. And so that, like David Green, I suppose, here. But wherever you are, which is a lot of times very difficult to do, and they have a policy normally that they don't like to sign off on these things, and it's just another added administrative step. If it's an individual, sometimes it takes longer. It's harder to get things pushed through, and then with the entities, you have the added bonus because under the NFA, a transfer of a firearm is very broad. That can include loaning it. If we were at the firing range and you're like, man, this is a cool machine gun. Let me test it out. I've never seen one like this, and I hand it to you. I've had experts that are way over my head in this industry that specialize in it tell me that that transfer provision can actually be interpreted to mean providing access to. And so if you've taken it, have I loaned that to you? Well, if so, then I've effectively transferred a weapon without doing the application process, which is a violation of NFA. You're in violation of state law. I'm probably in violation of state law somehow too, and I've committed tax evasion because there's a $200 transfer tax every time you transfer one of those weapons. And it's actually, if you're an individual, the criminal penalties are $250,000 and 10 years in jail. And yes, the ATF honestly has not been, and to their credit, they haven't gone after everybody. I mean, they let a lot of these things go. Not all the time, and it's not safe to do. It's a stiff penalty. But most of the time, they're really going after the bad guys. Like they'll get somebody on a weak drug charge, but they know there's a weapon transfer involved, and so they'll tack on all these weapons charges. But there have been these outlier cases, and it is dangerous to even fool with the feds like this. And so what you can do, though, is you can get a corporation or an entity or a trust, and you can make yourself an employee, or you can have independent contractors that you make loans out to, and you can have it part of your corporate policies to make these loans to these people. And so then that allows you to make these transfers, and it's a legal transfer. But it's still, you've got to keep records. You got to have the entity integrity. You have to make sure that you have all of your ducks lined up in a row. And folks, there are a lot of things you have to do to make sure that your corporate entity stays intact. You have to file every year. You have to file public information reports. You have to make sure that you pay the entity tax, the franchise taxes. You have to you obviously have to file with the IRS. You're going to have employment policies, and you're going to have policies that say so. But a trust on the other hand is a private deal. It doesn't have to be registered with the state. It's simply a document. A trust is nothing more than an agreement down on a piece of paper. I like to think of it as a wagon almost. A trust is an estate planning tool that I use all the time, and it's the same concept. It's a little red wagon that you pulled around as a little kid, and you went around and you put rocks in and Barbie dolls or military figures or whatever. It's the same thing. It's a box, right? A trust, a a fictive box that holds your property. And so that trust is an entity, sort of in itself, sort of not. That's technically not true, but it's easy to think about that way. And it's like a corporation, sort of, and it can own these assets. Mm-hmm. And so, if you've got a trust, you just make everybody that you think you'll want to use your firearm a trustee, a co-trustee, or you have provisions in the trust that appoint them as a special, independent special trustee, or they're a beneficiary of the trust. And so that's an agreement between the trustee, as the person that pulls the wagon, so to speak, is the person that's in charge of the property. And they have a duty to follow the terms of the trust agreement to benefit the beneficiaries, the people who the trust benefits. And a lot of times it's the same person. A lot of times you can have the beneficiary be the same as the trustee. And so the trustee is effectively running and operating and managing the trust for his own or her own benefit. Okay? And so we can have this may be a lot. I mean, there's kind of a wide spectrum of
personally, there's a lot of people out there who utilize this for collection of machine guns or special types of weapons, and they want to look at them and every now and then take it out, shoot it, get the feel of the weapon. Others do it because they do it for an investment. So I guess it's worth going through the hoops to do that. Myself, I'm an operator. I'm a practical applicator of equipment. The last thing I want is to have to go through all that paperwork. So I look at it and I say, in most cases, I can get done with a semi-auto normal weapon that's not that much longer than some of these shorter ones. I can get done what I got to get done as compared to a full auto or something like that. Granted, they have their applications. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm just saying, think about it before you do it. If you think, oh, this is great, this is something I want to carry around, but I'm papered. Well, Ross is telling us of all the complications and all the technicalities that go with it. And if you're not up to snuff and keeping your paper and your accounting of that weapon and the transferring of that weapon proper, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. So just think about that.
And so remember, too, we spoke a few shows ago about just transfer of firearms in general, not specialty firearms like we're talking about today, or accessories, but just transfer in general. You got to make sure that you are a resident. You got to make sure that you're not a felon, that you are not a mentally defective, or have some kind of mental disability. You got to make sure that that it's legal, where you are to possess it. You've got to make sure that you are not under a protective order. There's all kinds of things that you got to make sure the person you're loaning it or transferring it to. So you effectively, when you talk about these specialty weapons, you got the Second Amendment's in play, the National Firearms Act of 1934, the Federal Firearms Act of 1938, the Gun Control Act of 1968, the 1986 Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act, the Firearms Owners Protection Act, the 1990 Crime Control Act, and the 1994 Crime Bill, the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, and the Violence Against Women Act, and the 1999 the gun bill that requires certain regulations as far as triggers. All of those things, right, come into play. Plus, in addition to state law, okay, in addition to local ordinances, okay. For instance, the case in was it Massachusetts?
Hey, while you're thinking about that, I had a comment. I don't know if this is a good topic to go over maybe next week or the weeks ahead, but you got these rules and regs, and then you got city ordinances. How does a city ordinance...
Washington, D.C. versus Heller. That's what I was trying to think about. Sorry.
Okay.
Where it outlawed certain firearms within the city limits, and the whole issue was did the Second Amendment does it apply to the individual? And yes, the Supreme Court in that case said yes. And then they came back in, I think it was 2010, said that the Second Amendment applies to the states and local ordinances too. So they have to apply. That's what I'm saying. That's why the Second Amendment, that's why I listed it in that list. That comes into play. Even if there might be a reg that's on the books, it may not be constitutional anymore based on that 2010 ruling. What were you asking?
I'll save it for another show, but I wanted to ask you real quick about weapons of opportunity. Let's say you're engaging in self-defense and you pull something out of nowhere as a weapon of opportunity. Could be anything. Could be your baseball cap, could be a glass of wine, a bottle of wine, a chair. Does any of that can any of that end up hurting you because you're using something that now turns into a club of some sort?
Well, we said a deadly weapon is anything that is designed or in its manner of use. And so a deadly weapon can be anything. There's all kinds of cases of,
So
of
my
weird
life's
stuff
on
like
light. Let's do something real short.
a plate. How about this? A plate. There's been a couple cases where a plate was a deadly weapon. I had a client. I represent a client that was charged with assault with a deadly weapon by using a plate.
How'd that go?
Good for me, but I mean, I didn't really. It was hard for me. It's not on the plate thing. I mean, you could use a plate as a deadly weapon.
I guess.
Bottom line.
All right, look, ladies and gentlemen, this segment is sponsored by Coppolino Dodd Krebs Law Firm, and we can't thank them enough. And attorney extraordinaire Benton Ross Watson comes on and does a fantastic job. Ross, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
My name is Benton Watson. My main office is here in Cameron, 105 East Main Street, 105 East Main. Big milk cow on the side. You can email me at benton@watson.legal. That's benton@watson.legal. You can call my office at 254-605-4140. That's 254-605-4140. Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody, we'll see you on the other side.